I'm particularly excited about and really kind of fits to the sessions that we've been talking about so far this morning. As this conference progresses, we're going to be learning more and more about some of the international and European markets. And for the US MLSs in the room, how do you interact? How do you reach out? How do you create these opportunities to engage with them, to find more ways to connect your members to these countries for business opportunities and also investment opportunities for additional revenue streams? So this panel, we're privileged to have Jeff Turner moderate this again. So with that, I'll kick it over to Jeff and we'll go from there.
Well, let's not stand on ceremony here. Let's get everybody to come up. Shayne Fairley, who's the CEO at Stellar MLS, is going to be on this panel. We've got Matthew Ebrescia, who's the president at Second Generation, and Carlos Grass, who's the CEO at Stratus Data Systems. So if you've ever been on a panel before, sometimes the phone call that you have when you're sitting and talking with everybody about the panel ends up being so entertaining and good that you wish that you could have just recorded that and put it up here for everyone to watch. I hope that's not the case with this panel. But we had a very lively conversation that I was very appreciative of, and a couple of things came out of it. Obviously, the need for consistent data in real estate, it's necessary, obviously, to drive this industry forward, for innovating and creating a symbiotic relationship between MLS companies and startups. But the fragmentation in the data, cultural differences in Europe pose challenges for implementing that technology. So I'm going to start with a question, and Carlos, we might as well just go in this direction and see how people respond to it. How do you see the role of MLS evolving in real estate market development, especially in emerging markets like Egypt, where consistent data and a reliable source of truth are crucial but not there? How do we do that?
So it'll probably take years. It's not a technological problem. It's cultural. It's trusting a system that by sharing your inventory with other competitors, you will actually do better. Many markets are not ready for this type of systems, and you can put the best system in the world there, and it's not going to be adopted. So it's very challenging. It's different than North America, for sure. And even, forget Egypt, even in Europe, many countries, it will take many years for them to adopt a system of collaboration and compensation.
Don't we struggle with some of those same things in the United States, even with the differences in markets in the US?
Yes, absolutely. The US, look, the MLS provides a very valuable service, which is ensuring the data is accurate and not duplicate listings like in many markets in Europe with different prices, which it's a terrible thing for consumers. But implementing the North American model in Europe and anywhere in the world, it's a huge undertaking. It takes a lot of work. Look, we've been in Europe for 3 years now, and there is no MLS in this one country. So we did a strategic partnership, because collaboration is very important, with a bank that has 5 million consumers. So the idea is they use their bank ID, and they have access to the inventory through the bank platform, so there is trust there. Now we have a few million consumers accessing real estate, so the realtors have to adopt the platform if they want to participate. So in a way, that was our way of creating the future MLS in that country. So you have to be creative. It's not a technological problem. You can have the best system in the world, and it's not going to get adopted. So you have to work with local institutions and be very strategic how you deploy it.
Matthew, I'm going to skip over you real quick. I hope you don't mind. But Shayne, you put a fairly lengthy comment to this whole role of MLS in market development with some of the work you've been doing at Stellar. Can you sort of highlight some of that?
Sure. So we actually do have some experience in this, and a lot of it is due to our entry into Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a market that was very, very fragmented at the time. Much of the real estate was done the exact same way that we've heard that's done in the European markets and other markets as well. So somebody would have a property, they would put it up on their website, and then all of a sudden it would be scraped by 10 other people and put up on their website. And so there really wasn't any kind of standard system that anybody was using at the time. And so what we needed to do is we needed to go in and talk to some influencers and make sure that we knew exactly who the key players were. And so we did a lot of research because, like Carlos said, getting that buy-in and then having those influencers go and try to spread the word to get that cooperation that you're talking about is very, very key. And so that's something that we're very proud of. We've been providing the MLS database for Puerto Rico for about 5 years now. And so we're happy that they just renewed. So we're obviously doing something good in that market. So, but it's still challenging, and even though we've put together, in my opinion, a true marketplace for Puerto Rico, you still have people that want to do their own thing, right? And so that's why you need to have those success stories of the cooperation and the sharing of the data instead of just hoarding it for themselves. And so I think that that's been helpful.
If you could go back and start over, what one or two things would you do differently based upon your experience?
Honestly, we would have done more research. So even though we did research, I don't think that we can do enough research and going in and trying to just understand what the cultural differences are, and then how their way of doing things and how that translates into what we're doing as well, so that we would be able to probably get buy-in a little bit earlier. Because what we needed to do is we needed to go in and we had a very lengthy communication and training plan in order to make sure that everybody was aware of what the new system was. And we're a stickler for rules. There was kind of like the Wild West out there, so it took a little bit of time in order to get them to buy into the compliance aspect of it and the clean data that comes out the other side when you do make sure that you're following all the rules.
Awesome. Matthew, I'm going to take this next question. I'm going to direct it at you, and if you want to punt it to someone else, feel free. But you've been an entrepreneur long enough, I think, to add some spice to this. What are the most effective strategies for fostering an entrepreneurial ecosystem around MLS? How do we go about doing that? How do we go from this almost institutionalized, afraid to make changes, crapping our pants every time we have to take something to the volunteer board to get anything done? I'm in Europe. I can say anything I want about volunteer boards, right? How do we get to a more entrepreneurial mindset on the MLS side of the equation?
That's a great question, and I'm very excited to be here because I see a bunch of fellow entrepreneurs around me and people who are very much motivated to grow this industry and evolve it into something that we all know it can be. But if we go back and think before technology, the reason that the MLSs were started, it was a market dynamic. That there was a reason that the communities came together to share their listings, to pool them, because it created greater exposure. It allowed that agent in a market to show their property listing to more people, to get it out there. And then there was marketing around that, and it was typical newspaper and radio or television. But you addressed this, and the first big dramatic shift in this whole that changed the industry was the internet, right? The internet is the only place where you can post content for free and reach a global audience, right? The more this content is optimized for programmatic distribution and machine learning, the more widely spread it will be available. And what is real estate but exposing your property to the broadest audience in order to achieve the highest value? It's the same thing. We have this new technology now called the internet, which is an equalizer. It is everywhere in the world. There's nowhere in the world you can't access it. And it allows this entrepreneurial spirit to be fostered if we embrace that, but it all comes, as we all know, from consistent data standards. If the data is not consistent, if if you have a different standard in Japan than you have in France, it's just not going to be as optimal because it's all about machine learning and Google and indexing and allowing people who want to find the content when they come online to deliver the content that's relevant to them. And I'm not sure if I'm really addressing
No,
your question.
I think you are, because what you're talking about here is how do we make the MLS that source of data that ends up powering all of these things that we've driven by it? We talk about data being the new oil.
Yeah.
How does the MLS become that collection basket, not just for the listings, but other data as well?
You alluded to it. I mean, I think I believe so strongly, and it's a fact. Property listing is an asset. Every agent needs to understand that property listing is an asset. They bust their butt to go and get that listing, to work with the seller, to convince them to put that listing in their hands. Some of the time, it's many times the largest transaction that a consumer is gonna go through. And what happens in the US is agents don't realize the value of that asset. They give it away to somebody else, and then somebody takes that listing and puts it on their website, and then they're getting the traffic and they're selling it back to somebody. MLSs have the opportunity to take that value, and data is the asset, right? And it all starts with recognizing the value in that asset and putting the control of it back in the person who created that asset, which is the listing broker, listing agent.
So there is also the need, though, to invest in companies that will pour data back into the MLS so the MLS can take advantage of that. How do we foster that kind of investment in the technologies that are willing to respect the right of the MLS to collect that data and to contribute back in? What is necessary to foster that kind of change? Because I think it's a change in the way we think about how we deal with data and the kinds of data that the MLS contains.
I wish I knew.
Carlos, you have ideas? Shayne, either one of you.
Yeah, I mean, well, it starts
go
with
ahead.
the RISO standard core database. I mean, the standards are the way. And so that's why we were a very, very early adopter. We were the first large MLS in order to answer RISO's call. And we did it because we knew that if we were able to show that this is achievable, that others would follow. And so that's where your innovation kind of comes in, right? Because I only have to code my product to, the standard core and then maybe some custom fields along the way. But then that also provides that roadway back into the ecosystem, right? And so we're all trying to kind of build these platforms. And you were talking about, somebody was talking about earlier about the infrastructure needing to change and some of the systems that we use, right? Well, that's going to happen through standards. And so there's a lot of large brokerages in the U.S. that are trying to build platforms in order to maintain all this data. And we're trying to do the exact same thing. And so we need to get into plumbing first, and we need to do that in a standard way so that we can build on top of it.
Carlos?
Yeah, I think it's very simple. The MLSs have the power when they're negotiating a contract with a vendor, saying any information that is created from this relationship has to come back to the MLS, and the MLS has to have the right infrastructure to store it and leverage that information. So really, in reality, it should never belong to the vendor providing the service. It should always belong to the MLS. And that's a contractual obligation that anybody would sign.
I know that CRMLS has taken steps in that direction with vendors in their contracts. Are you moving in that direction at Stellar as well?
We are. Yes, as contracts are coming up for renewal, that is something that we want to have.
And how are people reacting to those changes?
In various manners. Some are more willing than others, that's for sure. So, but it's a conversation. And if you want to do business with us, then that's a requirement.
Yeah. Matthew, you had a comment in that regard?
I just wanted to say, as an entrepreneur, we're looking for scale. Scale is everything. You want to know how big can you grow your business? And when you have fragmented markets, when you have, even in the US, now I think there's 500-600 MLSs. Before there were 2,000, right? And the reason that you have such limited penetration from a portal standpoint is how difficult is it to work with 500, 600, thousands of different organizations you had the same thing if you want to reach a global scale. It's just entrepreneurs are going to look at that, say that's too much of a problem. I'm not going to do that. Let me figure out another creative way around it to solve it some other way. And so if the industry were able to coalesce around a single platform, it's just going to drive innovation because people are going to realize the scale and the utility of it. Now with AWS, you can spin up business in a minute. And before that, you had to go get a data farm and your own physical hardware and all that kind of stuff and make a huge capital investment. But we see tremendous innovation, and your point about the models growing, it's all because of the cloud computing that exists now that you can access that. If people had to invest tens of millions of dollars in that, you're not going to see the level of innovation that we see.
Well, it took me, I don't know, 15 minutes to take the 600-page document, I forget what it's called, the answer book or something like that. What's that thing you have to study when you're getting your RCE? Is the answer book, right? All right, so one of our staff members said, it would be a good idea if our customer support staff, understood everything in the answer book. And I'm like, seems rather daunting. Literally less than 15 minutes to build a GPT that took that 600-page document in 60 seconds. It had completely read it. Ability to ask it questions, got back accurate answers. So data integrity, this is no longer going to be a technology challenge. Any human who has the ability to speak English or any other language that any of these language models are going to accept, to begin coding integrations into this data. So let's talk a little bit about data for a second. Let's talk about data quality and integration. How do we ensure high quality data? Carlos, you talked about the challenges in the European market because of the different cultural differences. I mean, you were very specific in our pre-conversation about that. How do we ensure that data quality in that kind of an environment?
First of all, you need to have access to land registries in the local markets. But we had to develop tools that we didn't need in North America. We are heavily relying on machine learning and AI, and to be able to get information from different countries, different languages, and say, okay, this field in this market is used maybe 60% of the time, so it's not a mandatory field. So we identify patterns used in the various systems, and then we harmonize all of them into a single database. But it's not humanly possible for somebody to sit and figure this out. It has to be an automated process. So now it's part of our back end. We also, the listing maintenance product is fully automated. You don't need developers to add new fields to the database or value. We can do it in 2 minutes, so we don't waste time doing those jobs that used to take months. We are investing heavily in machine learning and AI, mainly computer vision, NLP. So our back end will have NLP parsing, so if the front end can accept that, they will have natural language processing on any front end in that market. So we are providing on the back end all these services to any front end that can use the RISO standard. So the automation actually ensures data quality.
Got it. So you're actually providing the backbone for what might sit on the front end.
Exactly. To any front end.
Any front end.
Right.
What's happening on the Stellar side of the equation relative to that?
Yeah, so it comes down to the common set of rules that everybody needs to follow. And you're talking about doubling down on cooperation. Well, that's one way of doing it, is that we need to enforce the rules. And sometimes our customers don't like that. However, the data accuracy is paramount. And so, if there's somebody that needs to update something just to make sure that it's accurate, I think that that's one of the main pluses to what we have in America, is that common set of not only fields but also rules that we can all play by.
I'm going to go back to the internet again because that's my business. That's what I know. My company owns the .realtor and the .real estate top-level domains, And we got involved.
That's a good gig if you can get it.
It's not always easy, let me tell you that. But I will tell you a
It
little.
always looks easy from the
It always looks easy from the outside.
Go, Daddy.
But we got involved early, and I use this as a good analogy. ICANN is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. They run the internet, and their mission is to ensure the security and stability of that internet. And the reason that the internet works globally is it's built on the standards. They're all universal. And the only way that data can move across borders is because it's standardized. And ICANN's mission, as I said, we got involved early on when there was only .com and .net and .org, and they controlled everything. Every name was registered in that. But they realized that there were a lot more varieties of data out there and ways that consumers would want to find that data. And they created additional top-level domains in order to do that. And we continue to utilize the same standards, and that's how it works. The ICANN works with every government around the world to make sure that they follow the same standards. They're constantly updating those and working with them. And I would encourage this organization to look to similar models to see how other groups are doing it, to implement it here.
What teeth does ICANN have to enforce those policies?
They control the root infrastructure that runs the internet. So all the root computers that control the way that people find information. At the end of the day, computers know IP addresses, numeric IP addresses. Humans know letters and characters. So that's, at the end of the day, what we do. When you go to google.com, there's computers behind the scenes that are translating those characters into an IP address so that your browser is delivering you to the website. And that core infrastructure is what ICANN controls. In order to run a TLD, you have to be installed in the root zone of the internet. And because the US government created the internet back in the 60s, they control most of the root servers reside outside of Washington, D.C. in McLean, Virginia.
Should RISO be that? Shayne, I'm looking at you specifically.
Sam?
What's the analogous relationship to real estate? What is the ICANN of real estate? How does this get teeth?
Well, I think that comes through the policy, and I think that's where the rules kind of come into play, and that's one of the benefits to the system that we have in the States is that it does take enforcement, and that's done through policy.
And specifically, which rules are you speaking to right now?
I'm speaking to the NAR rules right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we also have standards of conduct, which are very close to the code of ethics that are built into our rules as well.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question I didn't think I'd ask, but heck, we're in Europe. Let's just go for it. There's some really tough decisions that are going to have to be made here in the next 6 months to a year. How do you broach these really tough decisions relative to relationships inside of organized real estate with volunteer boards that may or may not have the ability or the understanding to make those kinds of decisions? What's the responsibility of leaders on the MLS and association side in getting their volunteer leaders and their volunteer boards onto the train that moves in a slightly different direction?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I can tell you what we're doing. What we're doing is we're trying to raise awareness, because there's a lot of different what ifs that could happen out there, right? That was a theme at CMLS, was what if, and that's one of the things that we're looking at is, things could go left. What happens if they do? Things could go right. What happens if that were to materialize? And then we're also trying to make sure that our shareholders are aware. So we're going and setting up shop and making sure that we're inviting all the brokers so that they're aware of what all is happening out there. And we're trying to just prepare. We're keeping our heads down, right? And we think that we're going to have a product that hopefully our customers want to continue to pay for, regardless of what happens with lawsuits or anything like that.
Yep. How do you and this is an open question. I don't know who's going to answer it. Maybe nobody will answer it. I have no idea. How do you battle up against, even in our leadoff speaker's publication that bears his name, the clickbait headlines and the crazy negatives that are pouring out? How do you manage that and pair it up with what is an obvious opportunity on behalf of the industry to make changes that maybe they've been afraid to make for a long time? Matthew, go for it.
I just piggyback on something Shayne said, which is awareness, right? And as I mentioned, if you look at other organizations, and you can look at their successes and also their failures. And I will say, in my own personal opinion, ICANN has failed in the awareness aspect of that. Because they have the teeth, so that you say, there's not as much of the motivation. But most people in this room probably didn't know that there was a .realtor or .real estate, or that there were other things besides .com. People see them, but when I tell people I own .realtor, .real estate, they say, "Oh, realtor.com. Yeah, I know that realtor.com thing." Like, no, there's no .com. But if ICANN were to make the world aware more of this, then there would be greater adoption. And I would encourage RESO you have the first mover advantage. You've established systems, it's working, it's successful. Piggyback on that, use that as a use case, a case study, and take it to other places. People are gonna see the value. Everyone in this room understands the value of it. It's just about getting it to a broader audience.
How many minutes do we have left here? 20? Awesome, perfect. Good. So what should investors be looking for when they're deciding to fund MLS technology companies, especially in markets that are still developing or have these unique technological needs? What if investors are coming, and there's gonna be some investment required, whether it's by the MLS directly, from the vast reserves that sit in your banks, or from outside investors, there's got to be a case made. This change isn't going to happen without investment. How do we make that happen? What advice do you have?
I think if you are solving a real problem, that is obviously a problem, you will find investors. I see a lot of products being pitched that shouldn't exist in the market. They're just creating noise, and they're not solving the problem correctly. They do a very small, they are cool, but most of those companies disappear within 1 or 2 years. I think you tackle a big problem like data. We started a company 4 years ago just to do backends because we saw that data is important, and most backend platforms in North America are outdated. They're not ready for the future. So we made a huge investment into the backend, including blockchain, AI. So the backend is not just listing data. It's all these other services that are part of the backend. They work together. They're fully synchronized. And I think that's the value. And investors will see that, and they realize, wow, this is the future. This is what we need to move forward.
Carlos is absolutely right. It's cliche, but that movie Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. Entrepreneurs, successful ones, are always out there looking for opportunity. If they see it, they will come. So you just need to build the right systems, and there will be no shortage of entrepreneurs.
So Shayne, what I want you to do is comment on the balance between developing this really strong technological back end and the appealing front ends that seem to get all of the sexy news.
Well, without the back end part of it, the front end sexy news doesn't really work. It's not that sexy, right? And so I think that's where there's a little bit of a balance, because you don't want to go full bore to where there's so much of a technological requirement that then that kind of prohibits that innovation. And sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay. What I'm looking for here is, given the fact that the future is uncertain, like it's moving so rapidly, Everybody agrees. I've not met anyone who lives inside of the technology space who doesn't agree. They've never seen a pace like this ever. Not even in the dot-com boom. It was a different kind of pace. It wasn't the kind of transformative announcements coming out seemingly every other week. When we look towards the future, what strategic focus should MLS systems and technologies adopt to ensure that they maintain this control over the data? What is going to have to happen? What are the structures that need to be there? Whether they're political structures or technology structures or cultural structures that need to exist?
I think that there needs to be all three. So there needs to be some cultural adherence and excuse me, not adherence, but understanding that there are differences, identifying what they are. But at the end of the day, you need to make it easy to work with you. And so if you're developing products that are moving in that direction, then I think that you're on the right path. And we don't know where this is going to go, so you need to always be out there trying to look to see what could be next. You're able to look into the future with your partnerships with StyleDot. You talked about that, and so I think that surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals that are looking towards the future is one step.
How do you go through that process of evaluating the partners you want to work with, the ones that you're going to, time is an investment as well. The moment you commit to developing with a partner, whether you've made a monetary investment or not, you're investing time. How do you make the decisions around the technologies that you want to work with?
Well, we want to provide best-in-class technologies, but we also want there to be, a good business partner relationship. And so we get pitched by a whole slew of products and vendors all the time. And the ones that come in and they sit down and we feel that they're genuine instead of just trying to make the quick buck, that's going to go a long way. And I think that that's really what it comes down to is trust. We feel like we can trust you. We feel like that you're going to provide a product that is going to provide transparency and it's going to help move the market, help move the needle forward. Then you have our audience.
Yeah.
I want to say, you use the term data is the new oil, right? And I'm saying property listings are assets. If MLSs realize that, and whoever owns the data wins. And with machine learning and all these other kind of things, that's just gonna.
But it's not owning data to hoard it. It's owning.
No.
It's owning data to make its use more valuable.
Exactly. Yes, and making sure that it's being distributed and people are building innovation on top of it, allowing that innovation to happen we have this international market. It's like a gold, the old gold, the oil rush. There's an opportunity internationally of all this untapped oil sitting in the ground that if you could go and capture that data and uniformly establish it, then you literally have an ongoing oil well that will pay for your lifetime.
Yeah, and the cool thing about data is it's renewable. It doesn't actually get burned up as it gets used. You get to use it over and over and over and over again.
Well, with real estate, it's even more important because what the person, the end purchaser, they're seeking that data. They're actively seeking it out because that's what they want. They want to see what the property looks like. They want to find that data. People are hungry for it. It's different in other industries where you might have to push people to find the data. Here, consumers are actively requesting it. So just make it available. Put it in their hands. Put it in whatever way they want to consume it. That's what's going to build this incredible value.
So let's talk a little bit about what we might be able to learn from things that have taken place on the technology side in Europe. And Carlos, I think it was you that talked about it in our phone call, the digitization of processes like mortgage applications in Europe. What can we learn from that side of the equation?
Right. So we basically brought fintech and proptech into a single platform. So you could be guaranteed a mortgage amount from the get-go, so it becomes part of your search criteria. You can, usually financial institutions have a lot of information. They know who they're dealing with and speed up the transaction process. But going back to all the technology changes, we see a lot of new technology changing fast. It seems like it's chaos, but I think
Is there an advantage to having a blank slate right now in Europe?
it's so exciting. Are you kidding me? It's a dream come true. So many possibilities. And for sure, real estate is going to be disrupted. And if we don't do it from within the industry, there is big money coming from outside the industry to take advantage of this. Change is happening extremely fast. I talk to a lot of technologists and people. I mean, we have a data science department in the Netherlands because that's the only place we could find one. They're all busy. They're all fully employed all over the world. So you hire talent wherever you can find. We have 20 people in Prague working full-time on the fintech, proptech platform that we are deploying there for Europe. So it's very exciting.
It's very exciting.
And in Toronto, we are doing amazing work as well. We are developing a lot of back-end services for the talking house. I mean, a talking house can only be successful if you have the right back-end for it.
100%.
So if you don't have the right data and the right tools, you can have the best hope for a product, but it will never take off.
So let's continue on this excitement theme, and maybe we end here. Let's end on excitement rather than, I mean, there's a lot of chaos, a lot of doom and gloom inside of the industry. From an entrepreneurial mindset, and I believe definitively that the MLS specifically needs to move towards more of an entrepreneurial mindset. As an entrepreneur, and as someone who should be thinking as an entrepreneur, what excites you most about the chaos in the industry right now? Don't all jump at once.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I think that that's what it comes down to.
I'm seriously not going to let you off with that answer. I'm a big believer that if you've had an idea that you thought, you know, if I enact this idea, my members are going to go absolutely nuts right now to do that, now's the time to do that idea, because they're already nuts. I'm just wondering if anyone has that same mindset, or if I'm the only idiot on the stage who thinks that way.
I mean, you don't want to upset the apple cart too much either.
How much would you like to upset it?
I just want to keep our head down and keep on doing what we're doing because it's working.
For entrepreneurs, uncertainty is you know, it's not great, right? I mean,
Right.
we don't want uncertainty. But if you're an entrenched player and you're unwilling to change, then the world's going to move by you. So both sides, you know, need to recognize you have to accept some level of uncertainty, but you also have to have some level of progress being made on the other side. So, MLS is that it's working. Don't we don't need to change anything, but the world's moving right beyond that. So before MLSs, before the internet, it was a different thing. Now the internet came along and they had to adapt. Now machine learning is coming along. You have to adapt. Businesses need to adapt and grow, or they're going to die.
I think the key.
Bring us home, Carlos. Bring us home.
No, I think the MLS is in a good position. They provide a very valuable service. I think the key is to adopt new technologies without disruption, without disrupting because the brokers require a system to earn a living. So you cannot just keep changing things for them.
So you're
But
taking Shayne's side, is
I
what you're
think,
saying.
yeah, you can bring new technology without disrupting them, and a gradual change. So it might take a year or 2 years, not, okay, we bought this new tool, now everybody has to use it within 6 months. That's disruptive. That's not helpful at all. But gradual movement towards newer technology is very important. Otherwise, they're going to be left behind.
Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, Shayne, I don't know if you were a boxer, but you did an incredible job ducking and diving on those questions.